Two Russian cargo ships, the Sparta and Sparta II, docked at the port of Tartus on January the 22nd after weeks of idle wandering off the Syrian coast. The heavy weapons, military vehicles, artillery and ammunition crates, guarded by soldiers, had been waiting for weeks at the port of Tartus to be loaded onto ships. The day the ships docked, Syria's new government terminated the 49-year lease. But where will these ships go? The number of experts pointing to Libya is increasing. Transferring equipment to Libya could allow Moscow to maintain some presence in the region, as well as create a bridge with its controversial operations in Africa. Some also see Sudan and Algeria as options. An analytical article prepared by Radio Liberty's Mike Eckel and Mark Krutov states that the end of Russia's military presence in Syria will in any case change the calculations in the region. In the short term, this is a fairly serious logistical problem, but perhaps in the medium term, the problem will not be so serious. Most of the options in Libya do not have any significant pre-existing naval facilities, and much of the infrastructure that does not exist has been damaged during the war. Most likely the Russians will have to build from scratch, says Siddhart Kaushal, a senior research fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, a London-based think tank. Another problem is that Russia has limited access to the Black Sea. Under a treaty signed a year ago, certain warships are not allowed to pass through the Bosphorus Strait. While Russia's submarine fleet remains a formidable force, its surface fleet is increasingly aging and looking like a rusty fleet that is falling apart. It is possible that the Russian Navy will attempt to maintain some form of presence in the eastern Mediterranean in the short term, in order to show that it has no need for Tartus and to save face, said Mike Plunkett, senior naval analyst at Janes, a British security research group. If we assume that the Black Sea will remain closed to Russian warships in the near future, it is highly likely that Russia's permanent presence in the Mediterranean will soon become unviable and will be abandoned in favor of high-priority tasks, he said. Russian President Vladimir Putin's unannounced visit to Syria in December 2017 was portrayed as the fulfillment of a mission Moscow had begun 2 years earlier to support Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad. However, it is still unclear whether Russia will be able to maintain even a small presence in the country. On January the 22nd, it was reported that the new Syrian government had terminated the port lease agreement with Russia. The arrival of two Sparta cargo ships in Tartus also occurred on the same day. The two ships, owned by Oberon Logistica, a shipping company affiliated with the Russian Ministry of Defense, had previously been sailing off the Syrian coast for weeks. It is possible that the Russian Navy will attempt to maintain some form of presence in the eastern Mediterranean in the short term in order to show that it has no need for Tartus and to save face, said Mike Plunkett, a senior naval analyst at Janes, a British security research group.
According to Associated Press, NATO's Secretary-General, Mark Rutte, on Monday warned Russia was trying to destabilize countries in the alliance as he called on members to increase defense spending to counter Moscow. To guarantee our security in the future, we also need to ramp up our efforts now, Rutte said in a joint briefing alongside Portuguese Prime Minister Luís Montenegro as he visited Lisbon on Monday. We also know that the goal of 2%, now set a decade ago, will not be enough to meet the challenges of tomorrow. The threat from Russia may seem distant, but let me assure you it is not, he added as he also warned Portugal about Russian threats to its territory. Russian ships and long-range bombers menace the Portuguese coast. Portugal's fragile undersea infrastructure is squarely in Russia's sights, Rutte said. Rutte also addressed recent cable ruptures in the Baltic Sea. Just yesterday we saw another incident in the Baltic Sea with disruption to a cable connecting Latvia and Sweden. The good news is through Mission Baltic Sentry, NATO's ships and aircraft are operating alongside our allies over there, enabling a fast, coordinated response. Sunday's rupture follows a string of incidents that have heightened fears of Russian sabotage and spying in the strategic region. Earlier this month, NATO began a new mission dubbed Baltic Sentry, which included frigates, maritime patrol aircraft and a fleet of naval drones to provide enhanced surveillance and deterrence in the Baltic Sea, which the Transatlantic Alliance says is to protect undersea cables and pipelines.
Olha, querem melhor que isto? Só no contínuo? Já aconteceu aqui, de certeza absoluta.
Sim, Marco já acabou agora mesmo de jogar. Vai dar um bocadinho de
Queria, em primeiro lugar, dirigir uma palavra de saudação.
Today we discussed the security situation in Europe. Russia is trying to destabilize our countries and is challenging the resilience of our societies, with acts ranging from assassination attempts to cyber attacks to sabotage. And Russia continues to wage a brutal war of aggression against Ukraine. NATO supports Ukraine, and it is vital that we continue to do so. Just yesterday, we saw another incident in the Baltic Sea, with disruption to a cable connecting Latvia and Sweden. The good news is, through Mission Baltic Sentry, NATO ships and aircraft are operating alongside our allies over there, enabling a fast, coordinated response. NATO is strong today. And to guarantee our security in the future, we also need to ramp up our efforts now. That also means we need to spend more on our defense. And I welcome the recent increases in Portugal's defense spending. But we also know that the goal of 2%, now set a decade ago, will not be enough to meet the challenges of tomorrow. The threat from Russia may seem distant, but let me assure you, it is not. Russian ships and long-range bombers menace the Portuguese coast. Portugal's vital undersea infrastructure is squarely in Russia's sights.
De euros, que equivale a mais do dobro do que aquele que era o objetivo com que iniciámos o ano e com que chegámos a meados do ano. O governo português vai caminhar para reforçar o seu investimento em defesa sem colocar minimamente em causa o seu equilíbrio financeiro, contas públicas saudáveis, um país estável, um país seguro, um país atrativo para colocar a economia a crescer. Porque se nós não conseguirmos colocar a economia a crescer, não temos meios para investir na defesa como noutras políticas públicas.
Mesmo